Hello, dear colleagues. Today we'll present an overview of the low sulfide PGE ores of the Noril one intrusion, and I also discuss some genetic constraints for its formation. In general, we can distinguish three types of magmatic PGE ores. One of them is associated with coupled nickel sulfide ores in layered intrusions. The other comprise sulfide-free settings where PGE associate with chromite. And finally, the third and the most economically important type is low sulfide ores, which form near planar structures in layered intrusions and often contain chromite mineralization. A well-known example is the Miransky Reef in Bushveld, but such kind of ores also occur in Norris type intrusions, and an example which we're going to discuss today. As most of you probably know, and in the past presentations this was repeated, the Norris type intrusions are located in the northern part of Siberian lip, and they have a well-defined structure. They have three zones, the lower, main, and the upper. Lower zone and its hexacontact contain disseminated and massive sulfide ores. Main differentiated zone is relatively barren, and the upper zone contains the low sulfide horizon on which our study is focused. Here is a more detailed scheme of the upper zone, which holds low sulfide horizon based on drilling and exploration data. The roof rocks are basalts interlaid with carboniferous argillites and coals. Right below is the contact breccia and hybrid contact rocks, which thickness may reach up to 20 meters. The next unit is Lake gabbro, which transits to so-called taxite gabbros, rocks with extremely heterogeneous texture and composition, which are rich in hydrous minerals and cross-spinel. These taxitic rocks are main host of the low sulfide ores, which, however, may occasionally occur in other lithologies, including breccias and picritic gabbrodolerites. More subordinate lithologies include olivine-rich gabbros and taxite-like gabbros, which gradually transit to gabbros of the main series. So the main distinguishing features of the low sulfide ores are, first, high PGE tenor, which approaches those for the Miransky Reef and several other low sulfide chromatites worldwide. Then, this is association of PGE enrichment with dense chromite dissemination, which is also manifested in a well-positive correlation between bulk PGE and chromium contents. And texturally, these ore-bearing rocks are extremely heterogeneous and show enrichment in hydrous minerals. Lastly, it's very important that chrome spinel is not accumulated in layers, but instead forms irregular cloudy segregations. Considering in more detail its mineralogical composition, it should be first noticed that ore PGE contents are found in rocks with distinct oxide and sulfide mineralogy. As it was mentioned, the dominant oxide phase is chromite. Sulfides in the ore assemblages are poor in pyrrhotite and are rich in pentlandite and chalcopyrite. Silicates are similar to those of the rest Noril-1 intrusion and comprise plagioclase, clinopyroxene, and olivine, which are broadly replaced by secondary hydrous silicates. Noble metal mineralization is extremely rich in mineral species. I will show the details further, and now I'll emphasize that the dominant phases are platinum iron alloys, spirolite, and plenty of arsenites, stannites, and other chalcogenides. Right, so the question of the origin of low sulfide ores such as Bushveld, Stillwater, and Noril-Stalnach low sulfide ores is still far from complete solution and is one of the most challenging in the platinum topic. In the studied case, the attempt to solve this problem set the following questions. First, since the low sulfide horizon is found in the contact zone where were the ores magmatic at all? Then, are PGMs primarily related with chromite or sulfides? And then we should understand the origin of both chromite segregations, and if the PGMs are concentrated by sulfides, the origin of sulfides. And finally, we should figure out what kind of interaction between sulfide and chromatite results in formation of high tenor PGE ores. So let's begin. In terms of both petrography and mineral chemistry, silicate matrix has typical magmatic features, almost the same as the rest of the Noril intrusion, and does not resemble contact metamorphic patterns and composition. Secondary bulk chemical compositions of the rock show similar systematic as the magmatic sulfide ores of the Noril intrusion, and are clearly different from these crazy compositions of the contact rocks found in the roof of the upper zone. Finally, systematics of noble metals also show patterns which are concordant with the magmatic sulfide ores of the Noril deposits. So we conclude that the low sulfide ores are mostly magmatic in origin, and their parental magma was similar to the parental magmas for the rest of the intrusion. Further, the question of primary concentration of PGE meets the following important evidence. First, despite chromium and PGE concentrations are correlated, or PGE abundances do occur in chromite-free samples as well. Moreover, PGE content is better correlated with abundances of copper and nickel sulfides than with chromium. And finally, PGMs, as you can see from these photos, are mostly associated and very closely associated with sulfides, namely pentlandite and chalcopyrite. These all make it possible to conclude that PGMs are more related with sulfide, not chromite, with sulfide, and we suggest that PGMs primarily concentrated in sulfide liquid. These PGE-rich sulfides could have formed in situ or introduced in the current place from some other compartment. To choose the preferable way, we first of all estimate mass balance of sulfide with regard to the saturation level. The estimations show that content of sulfide in the majority of rocks, including barren rocks, up to an order of magnitude exceeds level of sulfide saturation, which shows that the present amount of sulfides cannot be dissolved in silicate melt in their present abundance. Furthermore, sulfide segregations preserve their globular shape, which implies quite fast crystallization and minor role of in situ accumulation of sulfides. Finally, the observed PGE content requires a very high R factor, which cannot be achieved in conditions of fast crystallization in a relatively restricted volume of the low sulfide horizon. So we conclude that the magma came to the chamber with already a pre-concentrated immiscible sulfide liquid, which is supported by one of the acknowledged mechanisms of formation of the Noril type intrusions. However, we must notice that the additional sulfide could have been formed during assimilation of the wall rocks, but this process was likely subordinate. So formation of chromatites and layered intrusions is often attributed to mixing between primitive magma and silicic or fluid-rich component. We studied breccias which host low sulfide ores and obtained the unique textural evidence which reveals that dense segregations of chromite around xenolates, of argillites and coals of the Tunguska series. Moreover, it has been found that cellular and skeletal crystals form right on the xenolate surface, while small grains of chromite are abundant in thin fractures, which is considered to be a hypothesis of melt pervading the xenolate during its digestion in magma. And it's also important that outside of the low sulfide horizon, these xenolites exhibit no signatures of dissipated chromite and the presence of chromium-bearing minerals. Even more striking evidence for crystallization of chromite triggered by assimilation is provided by the multi-phase intrusions hosted by chromite. These inclusions are composed by silicate glass and a set of minerals which is completely different from the rock matrix. After heating and quenching, bulk compositions of inclusions are different from the host rocks as well. Instead of this, the trace element pattern is similar to that of Tunguska sedimentary rocks. Taking into account that even in parts distant from the direct contact with sedimentary rocks, chrome spinel has anomalously reduced compositions manifested in ferric ferrous ratio, we conclude that chromite crystallization has been triggered by the contamination event. Chromite crystallized in this hybrid medium, and we suppose that quite dense chromite segregations were formed due to replenishing magma around these contaminated areas. Importantly, that broad ranges of chromite composition reveal extensive late magmatic and subsolidus transformation. As you can see, chromite composition strongly depends on the host silicate and degree of its alteration. Moreover, unique ranges of chromite compositions are determined by variable redox conditions. And what's important for our discussion, chrome spinel associated with sulfides and PGMs has essentially low magnesium composition characteristic for chromite objected to hydrothermal overprinting. This evidence bridges us to the next question of the origin of high PGE tenor. Mineralogical data reveals that in low sulfide ores, pyrrhotite is extensively replaced by secondary silicates. Former pyrrhotite is marked by the relics of pentlandite lamellae, and in certain cases is clearly evident that up to 90% of former sulfide is replaced. On the other hand, there is significant coarsening of chromite and growth of iron content in contact with sulfides. Given this evidence and data of the previous studies, which show that iron sulfides decompose in the presence of chromite, we suggest that pyrrhotite decomposed with iron being captured by chromite and has been accompanied by additional release of sulfur and other chalcogenes. However, this process only could not rise PGE tenor, could only rise PGE tenor, but not their absolute concentrations. Therefore, we need some redistributing process which concentrates PGEs in chromite-rich assemblages. This question may be the most challenging in this topic, and as only suggestion we can think about fluid redistribution, and given that the environment was rich in chloride, which forms soluble complexes with PGEs. These brines could have dissolved PGMs and result in circulation of chloride complexes of PGEs. And when the solution reached chromite-rich areas with excess of free sulfur and chalcogenes, they could become unstable and precipitate PGM in form of chalcogenides. In this way, long-term circulation of the brines could redistribute PGEs and concentrate in chromite-rich domains. And mention again that this is only a suggestion and needs to be proved better. So to summarize the talk, I will repeat that the following important conclusions about the Noril swan sulfide. First, low sulfide ores of the intrusion are distinguished by elevated PGE tenor and strong excess of chrome spinel, which abundance correlates with PGE content. Initially, we suggest that PGE were concentrated in magmatic sulfide liquid, which rich emulsion was brought from a deep chamber. Contamination of the magnesium and chromium-rich magma by pelitic sediments triggered chromite crystallization. Excess of chromite is preliminarily attributed to continuous supply of chromium to the contaminated volumes by magma replenishment. So growth of PGE tenor and their collection to chromatize are explained by first iron sulfide destruction in chromite-rich assemblages and possibly fluid migration of PGEs and their precipitation at high fugacities of sulfur and other chalcophile elements released by sulfide decomposition. So thank you for the attention. I would like to answer your questions now. Thank you.